Okay, this surface that I'm going to work on here is a very, very fragile piece of paper. I have trouble printing it because the fibers are so, I can show you a little bigger piece here. The fibers are they're thin, they're spread out, and the pre-coat does go through them, and they're very hard to get off the sheet. I use blue tape, and that's in my book. But anyway, what I like is that you can put a beautiful image on this type of paper with the Transfereiz. So again, I have my image has been rubbed out along the edge. And the secret with this is that you absolutely have to saturate it. If you don't saturate it, then it will separate. The image may not go all the way into the fibers, and I'll show you one I did that way just to see if I was correct. I just used one kind of brush through on the transfer solution, and it wasn't wet enough to take all the image off. And I think some of this might, soak through a little bit to the back, but let's put this down. Right about there. And then I'll smooth it out. I wonder if you can see the flecks of this brass and silver in it. It's very pretty. Now I'm moving this around, which is on a polypropylene sheet, but I'm not moving the actual transfer around. I am going to be very hard. Well, I give it a little bit of this, but I don't try to mess up the image, so I don't press really, really hard. I just get the image a bit into the paper. And then after I have done this a bit, I'll take my other tool and I will just go over it. Taking the film off. Again, I try to put equal pressure across as I pull this down. Looks pretty good to me. Yep, there it goes. Now here's what I have found cool about this. Very interesting. If I slowly pull this very fragile paper up, I am able to get it completely off of this and lay it someplace else to dry so it won't adhere to the plastic. See, some of the ink does flow through it because the paper is so porous, but you're still going to get a beautiful image. When I just took that last larger surface of this very fragile paper off of here, I don't think you really got to see it because it came out of the camera because it was so large. So I just want to show you, I'm not cleaning off these edges, and I'll show you something I do with that too. But I just want to saturate this and show you how funny it is that this is really this very fragile surface that is hard to lift up with pre-coats on it. Will come up pretty nicely. So I'm just going to do the entire thing. And I won't make you watch it all because it gets boring, I think, after a while. And you have a beautiful print or image on this fragile surface. And I can carefully pick it up and move it someplace else. You see the ink under it? Yes, it's going to escape because it's so porous. When I first thought to do this surface, you can see that's the front and so is that, I just tested on 2 smaller pieces to see if it would actually work at all. And this one I doubled the piece up because I thought maybe I would need to, but I really didn't. It just changed a bit of the print or the image. I keep saying print, sorry. It changed a bit of the image because this just made it flatter and more tissue paper-like, I guess, or not really. This is just a little more glossy. And but there's no problem with it on the fabric at all or the actual paper. So, and this one here, I will show you what happens when you don't saturate the entire piece. This is the one I talked about in the video where I just kind of went over and I didn't make sure it was really, really solid. And you can see the lifting in the image. And on the other hand, here's another image that has a very dark background and there's no lifting at all because I was really sure I saturated the entire thing. And you can see the edges are nice and square, even though I didn't rub them off. I didn't get any problems with them. And then here is the last one, the one you saw me do in the video. We're going to do an image right now on here. The secret again is for this one, if I haven't said it, but I might have, it needs to be saturated, very saturated. You cannot get the image to really go into the burlap unless you have it very wet. When you put it just on the top, it'll do what it did on those little places here where you can see that it lifted because I didn't want it to. I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't put a lot of product on that. So, but for here, I do want a lot of product on it because I want it to be very, very wet. It's really very beautiful when it's very, very wet because then you can actually put a lot of pressure on your brayer. And I don't know if this is enough here. Not quite. I want to put a little more down to the bottom here. You can press a little on your brayer. First, you have to obviously, first you want to get the image on top and not press too hard to mess the ink up before the transfer starts to get into the surface. So here we go, right here. I'll put it on and start to put it down. I've pressed it a little bit with the brayer, and I am not sure if you can see this in the video, but you can see in some places, well, it's kind of hard to see, but in some places where the top of the burlap, you can see the white lines through. That means you're starting to get it pressed into the fabric. And I do press very hard at this point, and it squeaks really bad. Time to clean my brayer or something, I'm not sure. So, and then I'll go back and hit it with this. And do that for a bit, wait my 3 minutes, and then pull it off. Pulling this from the back side, pushing it up evenly. And then we have our burlap surface. Okay, let's just take a quick look at some of the burlap. This is a transfer that I did that was on a larger transfer sheet, and I had erased around the edges. I could cut these out now if I want to use them in some type of my artwork. And here and over here and over here and over here, you can see some of the edges that are not there. I specifically did not put transfer fluid there, or I didn't put a lot of it. I kept it towards the center to see what it would look like. This is when it would be just kind of like, look like it got eaten away a little bit. So you can see that here and over here, and then in some of the parts here. But the burlap is still very visible in the texture, which is really, really nice. Then here's one I did, and then this is the one I did for the video. So I just wanted to show you what the burlap looked like. So now I have a piece of 16 gauge steel. This is, you can see what the steel actually looks like when it has just been roughed up and it's a little teeny bit rusty. This side has what is called gilder's paste on it in silver. And this will allow me to get a brighter print on the silver because you can see how much brighter that is. Now, I am not looking for a perfect print, but you know, I want it to look, well, it actually really doesn't matter because I like them all to be a little different. It's for a larger piece. So I'm just gonna put my coating. It's really not a coating, but it's a transfer fluid. And then I'm gonna take this and lay it down and then press it out. It's metal again. I'm not looking to totally mess up my print, but just a little. So, and the actual metal has little kind of holes in it from all the messing around it's been doing, like when I cut the edge off with the plasma cutter and did different things to it. So I will just make this a little better here and put this down so it will actually, you know, get the image to the surface. Thing that I do want to say about metal is when you think this is going to move, I've already seen some movement in here. What you do it in little sections. Because if you take it through a whole entire long piece, you have much better chance of the print moving around. So make sure it's pressed into it so that when you go to take it off, it doesn't all come off. And if you want a really perfect print, start small, keep playing with it, and you'll figure out what works best with you to get the metal where you want it to go. Here's a little quick tip. Something that I use once in a while are these, this is an avocado bag, but it's soft. And if you try to manipulate the print, it will press it down, but it doesn't mess with the print underneath it if it's going to move around. So it's just another way to make sure that your image is pressed down into your surface. Okay, again, when I lift it, I just try to take it totally across, and you can, and pull and push at the same time so it doesn't get all messed up. And there you go. This is brass. It's, I don't know, it's about 32 gauge, something like that. I roughed it up. I usually just rough it up with this Scotch-Brite, which is kind of like a Brillo pad, but not, you know, like a, what do they call those, stainless steel pads or whatever, but different. Anyway, I've got my image ready to put on the top, and I have my Transfereiz image transfer medium here. And so I'm going to put a coat of the transfer medium, not really, really thick, but enough that there's some on the sheet for sure, but that it won't get really thick underneath. When you do a non-porous surface, you want to get that fine balance between enough and too much, because when there's too much, it makes the image underneath, it makes the ink move around too much and you can distort your image. So I'm going to put this on here. I don't usually tape the image, but if you feel more comfortable doing that, you should. At this point, you might be able to put some tape on the top of it. So I'm going to lightly press it down to the metal because I don't want any of the ink moving around. Next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to use this little foam roller, and I'm not going to go across. I'm just going to go in little sections so that the ink doesn't move around, because it can really easily start to move because it's metal. So I'm going to do this a bit, and I won't be using a brayer on this, I don't think, because I don't want it to mess up the image. But sometimes what I do is I use this type of a brush to give it a little more pressure to make sure it is all the way into the metal. Because if it's not really laying on top of the metal, then what can happen is the image won't come through and you'll have spots. And it almost looks like right here I'm going to have a spot. I think that the metal is not quite, the transfer is not quite flush to the metal because the metal's a bit bent. And that can cause a problem too. So when our 3 minutes is up, we're going to find out how good we did. Time to lift this up. First, I go across the top and make sure that the image is still on the metal. And then slowly, ever slowly, I push this down across the surface as I roll the top back. And the surface is perfect. So now here is just a piece of printing plate, and I actually got some holes in this one really good. So my thing is then, this is dry overnight, but my thing is then to start to scratch it, scrape it up a bit. So these are like tools like from ceramics. And so if I scratch up the surface, I can get some of the print to still come off of it. And then I can take some sandpaper in just little spots and sand things out so that it scrapes up the print more. And now, if you actually are paying attention here, you can see that this is real. This transfer is on this metal. So when you do an absolutely perfect one because you want a perfect image, that image isn't going to go anywhere. But for me, I'm looking towards an ending piece that's going to have different types of metals in it that are not in great shape. So now I'm going to take a color of, this is actually something called Gilder's paste. I'm going to take some of the dust off of here. And try to get this sanded a bit in places, a bit more. Okay. What this does is, I don't know, they use it on jewelry and stuff to color metal and different things. I use it on my other steel. But what happens here is I can rub it into these scratches and stuff a bit and start to change the face of the image and where it's going. Sometimes I will go back to using my little piece of this, but right now I don't want too much of it on here. And you don't want to get too heavy-handed if you don't want too much of it on there, because it will get heavy-handed right away. Because what I'm looking for is kind of distress, but in a different way. I can go to another color. And just add in other places. Add to what I see. And just pretty much scuff this thing up. But you could do this forever, so we won't be doing that. But anyway, I just wanted to show you some ways to distress up a print and continue to work at it until you get it exactly where you want it. And then it becomes, other than a regular digital print, it has a little more character to it. And show you the other one I was working on. I got this to lift. I didn't care if it lifted. And then I've come back and I've scratched into it because I really love the distressed look. Then I just use the back of this as a little cleanup here. And I pretty much scratched up and messed up the print the way I kind of like it. And then if I come back here, let me just wipe this off first. Totally get the dust off. If I come back here and I can use the transfer emulsion, the actual fluid, and put a coat over this and let it dry. What you'll see here is a complete experiment. I haven't done this before. I have several pieces of very rusty metal that I got at some junkyard one day. And I always wanted to print them, but never wanted to put them through my printer. And that one's a little thick. This one probably could go through the printer. But now that I'm doing these transfer things, I thought I'd like to see what happens if I try to keep the rust on here. Now, I have washed this, and I haven't done anything to this part of the surface. I haven't really scraped it up or anything. I don't want to disturb the metal. So I really didn't do much of anything here, except maybe wash it with water and dust it off. So I'm going to just put a little bit of the transfer fluid on here. And then I'm going to put a transfer. So at the end of this entire process, I do use an archival spray. So it will get a coating over it, and hopefully we'll be able to keep the rust in. I just don't know. So I'm just going to put this down and do my entire thing with seeing what will happen, if the transfer will take. Well, it should take, but I'm just hoping it doesn't lift any of the rust when I lift this up. But, you know, it might not. So I'll just get it all set down, and then we'll go from there. Taking this transfer film off. Wow, this is cool. This is really nice. Lifted beautifully. Nice image.